Chapter 8.
Bella's point of view. It had been almost a week since he had called me for the first time, and so far he had called me every day since then. He always told me how much he loved me. When my phone had died, I received almost 30 texts asking if I was ignoring him and if I was okay. I was exhausted. This was tiring, and I didn't understand. Jenna was still gone, but had called me every morning to make sure everything was okay. Nothing crazy had happened, only the texts and calls from him. I couldn't help but imagine him, his face. I knew by this point I had watched too many movies and had too many daddy issues to not be slightly interested. But at the same time, this wasn't fiction. This wasn't just a situation I could make up or change. A kid had died in front of me. My entire school life had been completely fucked, and it was all his fault. I sighed and turned on the TV. I grabbed the beer that I'd just opened and sat down on the couch, pulling the fussy blanket over my legs. Jenna wasn't here to take the beer away, so I was in for a fun night. My phone pinged and I glanced down. It was only Alice, a message in all caps that read, "I swear if you started watching Wings of Desire without me, I'll kill you." I smiled. I had started it, and it was pretty good so far. It was one of her favorite movies about angels in Berlin after the wall collapsed, where her favorite band, Nick Cave and the Bats, had this super creepy club dance scene at the end. Well, that's how she's explained it anyway. She's also mentioned something about a circus performer. I just sent a winky face in return and turned my phone off. "What are we watching?" I jumped and spun around so fast, I knocked my phone halfway across the room. Right behind the couch stood a man. He wore a thick black leather jacket and black jeans. His hands resting an inch from where I had been sitting moments before. He felt familiar, yet he was a complete stranger to me. His black hair was short, but fell over his face. His skin tanned just slightly, and his eyes. They seemed to pierce into me, starting right through me, and I knew somehow that I'd seen those eyes before. "What the fuck are you doing here?" It was dumb, but it was the only thing I could think of. This was him. Caden.
Sit back down, he said, a small smile on his face, but his tone made it clear he wasn't fucking around.
I shook my head. I don't know you, but I did. I knew his voice, and God, his eyes were gorgeous. He raised an eyebrow.
That's why I said sit back down, Bella.
I inched further and further away, pulling the blanket up more, very aware now that I was wearing tight boxer shorts and a t-shirt. He shrugged and walked over to the fridge and took out a beer. I frowned. I had been planning on having that. He opened it with ease and sat down on the couch where I'd been previously. "What are we watching?" he asked, setting his drink down and taking off his jacket. I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. His exposed arms were covered in tattoos, but I also saw scars, lots of them. Some were covered by ink, but many others weren't. If his arms were this fucked up, no wonder he was stalking me. His brain had to be in worse condition. We stayed in our stalemate for what seemed like an hour. I hadn't moved closer, and he hasn't taken his eyes off me. I swear I could hear every creak of the house. Every single breath I was taking sounded way too loud. He finally leaned his head back and sighed. "Come on," he said, straightening to look at me. "You know I'm not going to hurt you. Just didn't want to be too much of a stranger anymore." Was he fucking serious? I moved slowly over to the edge of the couch and sat down as far away from him as possible, pulling my blanket over me. "Now I'll ask again," he said. "What are we watching?" I couldn't think. I didn't remember. I couldn't even remember to breathe. He chuckled and pulled the remote off the coffee table, pressing play. I stayed where I was, not moving an inch, not knowing how to act. This complete stranger sat a seat away from me, someone who was dangerous. How had he even gotten in? I know I'd locked the doors. I'd locked every window in the house. "Okay, so I'm lost," he said. "This is in another language and it's black and white. What is happening right now? This guy has wings." I pursed my lips and glanced over at him. "Well, you should have started it at the beginning, dumbass." He smiled. "You're right. But since I'm not, you have to catch me up. And since you'll be doing that, you should at least sit down. You seem cold over there." As if on cue, I shivered slightly. But there was no way in hell I was going to sit right next to him. I tentatively moved off the very edge of the couch and sat down on the cushion slightly closer to him. "Are you going to hurt me?" I asked. I know it was dumb, but I didn't know what else to do. He laughed. "Belle, you know I wouldn't dare do that. Unless, of course, you don't watch this with me, especially since I've rewound it." I didn't answer. I just faced ahead, still frozen. I couldn't help but glance over at him. Also, it didn't help that his cologne smelled so goddamn good. I was finally able to take in what he looked like, and that didn't help. He was gorgeous, hot in a conventional, attractive way, yet with all the black clothes and those tattoos he looked like he belonged behind a rock guitar on stage. "Questions?" he asked. He hadn't even needed to look at me to know that I was looking. I shook my head. My senses began to panic less. My breathing seemed normal after a couple minutes. The beer might have been helping with that, though, seeing as the can I had was nearly empty. Without warning, he grabbed it from my hands and stood up, walking behind me into the kitchen. I closed my eyes and just tried to breathe again. He's ruined all my progress with that just now. I felt his warm hand suddenly on my shoulder. He moved it slowly underneath my chin and lifted my head up slightly. He placed a new beer in my hands without taking his eyes away from him. "You look amazing tonight. Did you know that?" I opened my mouth to say something not very nice, but stopped as his hand went from my face to my hair, playing with it between his fingers. I shivered again, and he frowned, walking back around to where I sat. Without asking, he slipped an arm around my waist and pulled me to his side, holding me. As if on cue, my heart began to steady. The rapid beating began to subside and match his. That was annoying. This was better than the passive-aggressive
Texting, right?
His skin felt warm when it came into contact with mine. I pulled my legs up to my side so I was leaning more against him, his arms staying wrapped around me. The top of my head was just about level with his chin. How tall was he? Definitely a lot taller than me. My feelings of exhaustion seemed to stop. I just felt warm. "I'm still confused. What is the purpose here?" he asked me, staring ahead at the TV, distracting me from my thoughts. I think they were angels, and they take away pain," I said numbly. "But there is too much, and they begin to feel it. That's why he's began to watch her." I trailed off. Of course I'd have to pick this movie to watch tonight. "She takes the pain away from him," I finished softly. I felt his muscles harden, and as if on instinct, I leaned my head back against his chest. Without saying anything, he gently stroked the side of my face. I should have picked up in that, huh? I couldn't help but smile.
Yeah, you should have.